You want to say, oh, they're looking for these people to help them, to bring them medicine, water, aid, and you kind of gaslight yourself into thinking that some of these things are fine because you need the money, but there also comes a moment too where it just becomes too much to ignore.
In this episode, we reveal how much of what we think of as artificial intelligence is a carefully crafted illusion, powered by workers who are fighting for fair wages and basic rights in the digital economy.
Welcome to Socially Conscious AI, where we explore the cutting-edge innovations transforming our world for the better and bringing you conversations with the brilliant minds and ethical pioneers who are leveraging AI's power to address humanity's most important challenges. I'm Valencia Cardoso.
And I'm Roman Burkott. Today we sit down with Krystal Kauffman, a research fellow at DAIR, the Distributed AI Research Institute. She was also a lead organizer of Turkopticon, who spent years exposing the human workforce behind artificial intelligence. From her own experience as a data worker to her groundbreaking research on labor exploitation in tech, Krystal reveals how major companies like Meta and Amazon rely on thousands of gig workers to label images, moderate content, and train the very systems marketed as autonomous. Krystal, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Before we dive in, we should provide a content warning for sensitive audiences. This episode touches on mental health impacts, including anxiety, depression, PTSD, and digital workers' exposure to traumatic content, including violence, abuse, and self-harm. Thank you for being on the show and sharing your story. And I think one of the things that really came across to me and stood out was that you described AI as neither artificial nor intelligent, and that behind it are real humans. So I'd love to start with your personal journey that kind of led you to that perspective.
So it was roughly about 2015, and I had been working in politics for over a decade. I'd gotten really tired of it, and so I had gone back to school for geology. And near the end of everything, I became sick, and the doctors could not figure out what was wrong with me. But all of a sudden, I couldn't work outside of my house. I couldn't continue going to any classes or anything, and yet I still needed to pay my bills, keep a roof over my head, all of those things. And so this was pre-pandemic, so work from home opportunities were not as abundant as they are now. And in the area that I was living in, which was the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, they certainly weren't, there certainly weren't jobs around like that. So what I did stumble on was Amazon Mechanical Turk. And I looked at the site and I thought, well, something's better than nothing. I can easily do this. And so for the next 2 years, that's what I did to pay my bills, to, keep myself afloat while the health issues were getting sorted out. Um, when I improved a little bit, I still couldn't work outside of the home. So I thought, I'll keep doing this. I'm getting better at it. I know which tricks to use to catch the best paying work. And I set alarms in the middle of the night. So if something that I really want to work on pops up, I get up and I work on it. Um, and then I started to see things where I was almost making my health worse by not sleeping properly, by sitting at a computer for countless hours each day. And it was taking a toll on my body, on my mental health. And then I started to notice content, not the content that unfortunately some of the data and the data content moderators, that's what I'm looking for, content moderators in Kenya have been exposed to. Those are horrific images, but it was still things that were traumatizing. And I also started noticing pay disparities between certain areas of the world. And so once I got strong enough and had been doing this for long enough, I did join with Turkopticon as an organizer to start organizing against some of these things and try to get Amazon to change some of their policies. And then it was just a short time later that I took on the role of lead organizer. And it was a very quick, wild ride. But I'm glad to have had the lived experience behind all of this to help me make decisions now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you became kind of the voice of the invisible almost in that scenario. And I think like from my perspective, I would really want to understand like what was it like to suddenly find yourself dependent on gig work platforms due to like health issues? How did that kind of experience shape your understanding of the vulnerability that workers are facing within this kind of scenario?
Well, it's so common to hear this work marketed as something you can do when you stay home. If you have a health issue, if you have a mental health issue, if you're a caregiver, if you're a young mom, if you suffer from anxiety, whatever it is, it's meant to sound so appealing. And so you get started, and then you do get caught in this cycle of thinking, well, gosh, nobody's going to want to hire me for a regular job, or I can't quite pull it off. So what else am I going to do? And then it's this constant cycle of I have to be there when the work comes out, otherwise I miss out on that pay.
Mm.
And so you just become, I don't want to use the word addiction. That's pretty strong, but I guess, what is it? FOMO, fear of missing out, right? You don't want to miss anything that comes out. Otherwise, you feel terrible about yourself and, you could have worked harder, done better. And so mentally, it's not, it's very draining. It's very draining to keep this up and you're constantly switching tasks, you're constantly taking new training modules, qualification tests, all these things. When this labor is sold as unskilled labor, anybody can do it. It's a couple clicks. That is so not the truth. So many hours go into training and testing and things like that. And so just the mental stress of that also. Did I pass the test to get this qualification to get more or better paying work, or did I fail it? There's a constant stress all the time. And that's really not healthy for anybody.
No, and imagine that compounded with like the moderation of the content and all the things that you're gonna have to kind of process almost, right? You're processing a lot there, and that's a heavy load.
The one task that kind of made me stop, there's actually two, but the one that really made me go a different way with what kind of work I accepted and what I didn't was working for an account that was known to have a contract with the U.S. Department of Justice. There were aerial images you were asked to tag, nesting cranes or, cute little animals. And then every now and again, you would be shown some remote area of the world and they say mark border crossings, but not your typical, you go when you cross the border and it's a formal building and that's all fine and dandy. They're looking for a tire track or a footpath. And I started wondering, where where is this in the world? Why are they looking for these? And the people that made these tire tracks or these footpaths, are they going to receive help or are they going to be detained and experience some type of horror? And whatever happens, that's going to be on me for doing this task. And that's when I started paying closer attention to the types of things that were out there.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about that, right? Like it's almost like that sense of responsibility shows up just through what you're seeing and what you're exposed to.
You want to believe that every task has the best intention. You want to say, oh, they're looking for these people to help them, to bring them medicine, water, aid, and you kind of gaslight yourself into thinking that, some of these things are fine because you need the money, but there also comes a moment too where it just becomes too much to ignore.
I can't imagine the self narrative that would play out, especially working, in the middle of the night on something that, like, are you helping, like you said, find people to help them, or are you potentially, hunting terrorists? And however you feel about that, either way, that's life and death consequences to something like that. That you were trying to help identify cranes and animals that need protecting, right?
Yeah, they're paying me, a dollar or $2 to complete the task. That is not enough money, nor would there ever be enough money for me to decide who lives or dies or gets help or not. Like that's a heavy load to carry.
So you've said that People think AI devices are magically smart without knowing about workers like yourself, right? Do you have any examples of work that you've done that most people would be surprised to learn about, in addition to what you just mentioned, that really requires human labor?
Yeah, so I won't give specific names for sure, but products similar to Alexa, let's say, there were tasks where you start to figure out, hey, I'm doing training for XYZ. I've been asked to phrase the same question three different ways, and I'm, saying, hey, fill in the name Siri, Alexa, whatever you want to put there. And you realize that you're working on some of these things. Um, and that in itself is just it's interesting to think about because you have the tech companies trying to sell these technologies, right? And they're completely ignoring the fact that there is a gigantic workforce behind all of it. But it's just this wonderful thing that's going to listen to what you want it to do, and it's going to do that thing, and it's magic. It's going to make your life easier, and it's so much more convenient and by design to keep these workers hidden. And so they sell the illusion. It's not just the technology, it's the illusion of something futuristic and, cool, and it can think and do things on its own when that obviously has proven, especially in recent years with recent research, to be very, very untrue. But the big tech companies are masters of spin.
So there's unseen workers working on like labeling data or coming up with things like for these digital assistants. There's also, as I understand it, a lot of like content moderation and reviewing of content on various platforms. As I understand it, you've worked with data workers from around the world. Um, Help us understand, like, what are some of the more shocking working conditions that you've encountered, especially in international markets?
Yes, so I'm glad you asked this question, even though it's always a hard one to answer. So I work with a data workers inquiry, and we have partnered with co-researchers to where they do the research within their own community inside some of these places, these huge factories, Sama and Meta, and all of these things. And the stories that have come out of these are absolutely heartbreaking. There is somebody who was annotating data of a civil war that his people were actively involved in,
Oh,
and he witnessed the murder of his cousin through data annotation at his desk, and he was told to get over it and get back to work. Um, the BPOs in Africa, they target specific slums in Nairobi, and they're like, here's this opportunity, flexible hours, great pay, and again, they lure these people in. And some people move from different countries. They bring their child um, to to start with this new opportunity, and instead they're met with contracts that last 2, 4, 6 days, and then it's uncertain what's going to happen next. They're scheduled to work 8 hours, but the company says, I know you're at 11 hours, but you can't go home yet. And if you go home, you don't get paid for the 8 hours. And there are instances of sexual assault.
hmm.
There is a woman who was raped by her male colleague. It was discovered he had done this to, I believe, six other women, I believe. And management not only said, we'll take care of it, but also said, please don't go to anybody to report this. And she was forced to work next to him every single day and was stuck in a place that she moved herself to for this better opportunity. Um, the types of content that don't make it on the internet, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to data annotators and labelers for doing this work because they experience things as horrendous as child pornography, murder, war, and then are expected to just go on about their day and be fine. No mental health support, no just regular health support. There were fake counselors in one of these big um, companies, and they listened to people talk, but they were not qualified. So it didn't help. It's this is a topic I could go over for a very long time, and I would encourage anybody who's interested in it to go to the Data Workers Inquiry website, and all of these stories are there in the forms of reports or comics, documentaries, animations, all types of things. To communicate what these workers went through and how they're prevailing now. And there are some stories that I've heard over and over and over again, and they'll choke me up every single time, which is why I keep coming back to this work.
Wow. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I think the question that's really very top of mind is like, how can these massive, influential, even reputable tech companies engage in this? But as I understand it, a lot of times it's not that company itself that they outsource a lot of this work to try to
Right.
keep it at arm's length.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm not going to lie, these companies have top-notch lawyers that can write in loopholes that all of these things just slip right through. But one thing that we can look at is a lot of these companies are based in, say, California. And we can start looking at California law, pending legislation in hopes of maybe changing something in other places. It's very hard to be in Africa and try to fight for changes in the law. Although in the last couple of years, the Content Moderators Union and the Data Labelers Association over in Africa has been making huge waves and huge progress in organizing. So maybe we'll see some changes in policy there. It's an exciting time to watch all of this, but I think also going after these companies on their home turf. Um, I don't know what that looks like in the next 3 years or so, if we have to wait beyond that to try and, I guess we'll see how things unfold, but I think that's a piece of the puzzle. Also making consumers aware of what it took to get this certain product that they have in their home. Do I expect everyone's going to boycott these companies? No, I don't. But will some people? They will. And knowledge is power. And that's corny sounding, I know, but um, a informed society is a powerful society. So if information alone is, what we get out, that's progress as well.
Well, I really like what you said about us owing a debt of gratitude to data labelers. It sounds to me like you're not necessarily opposed to the work, there's value to it. It's more about the working conditions that really make it, I guess, inappropriate to to put it mildly. Is that fair to say? How would you describe that?
I mean, so it is something that is necessary. I don't know many people that could do this work without being affected by it in some way, but I think if you go at it with mental health support in place and there's regular interventions to determine how people are doing, set limits, set shorter hours, there are ways to work on this and see if changing the working conditions improves the end outcome for these people who are doing this work. Um, I know with the DARE, there's a project being worked on, and some of the content is really hard to deal with. And so it's very limited each week how many pieces of content each person looks at. A lot of care is put into prioritizing the mental health. So without without these workers, we would see some horrific things on the internet. It's a complicated issue, though. It's too bad we can't take a magical AI device and say, okay, get rid of all of this content right now. There are just certain things that programs can't pick up, they can't identify, they don't see, and that's where we still need the human intervention to make sure it's not making its way out into the mainstream.
Yeah. And then you also mentioned that there's some glimmers of hope with data labelers starting to organize and work for their rights. I think I've heard it from some of your previous work that there's some workers that will get like 70% of their work from a single requester. How does that
Mhm.
create like vulnerability, or what happens to the human if that work were to disappear?
Oh, wow. That has happened to people, and it's usually people who are the global majority, not the United States and Canada, basically. And more remote, I guess, you go from the United States. I have a colleague in Venezuela has about 5 requesters he can work for, one of which is a very good requester. If they were to pull their work off, uh, it would be the majority of his work. And then you have these other 4 requesters who may or may not be on the up and up. They might reject a lot for no reason. They may be problematic, or the work might not be consistent. So something like that can really take away somebody's, um, means of living.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Crystal, just even like switching kind of thinking about these organizations, right? And just thinking about like ethics and accountability. And you've called out some of these AI companies, right, for obscuring the human labor behind their systems. What would genuine transparency look like?
I think genuine transparency would be, in part, these tech companies acknowledging we use human labor from, these countries from around the world. And I think that opens the door to being able to look at the rights within these jobs, the pay, the conditions, everything like that. Um, and also, I think acknowledging that these workers deserve to be paid a regular living wage like the rest of the company. I'm sure other folks at Meta aren't making 50 cents for annotating, tasks. That could be another huge step in transparency as well, is fixing this pay gap and acknowledging that these workers are essentially the experts when it comes to this data.
Yeah, yeah, a very good point. And and what the other thing I'm noticing too is that like your work's actually been cited, right, in Congress and like leaders in letters to tech giants. And I think from a policy perspective, right, like what do you think needs to happen? I know you kind of touched on this earlier, but like um, to protect data workers.
So I do think there needs to be legislative change. I know that that takes a very long time, especially in the United States, to get something from an idea to all the way through. But I don't know that the answer is reclassifying these workers, which is what you hear a lot around Uber, Lyft, things like that. Employees versus independent contractors. But I think making sure that this class of workers, this industry is protected by the same labor standards as you would protect any other job. Somebody sitting in an office building doing data entry, that's data work. A person sitting in an office somewhere designing captchas that we all have to fill out every so often, that is also data work. So, yeah, definitely paying these people what they should be paid.
I think on the flip side, right? Like, how do you respond to the argument that AI will like eventually automate away the need for human data workers or just workers in general?
So, yeah, no, I mean, I hear that a lot. That's usually when someone finds out what I do, their first question is, how long is it before AI takes my job? And I know I'm smiling, but sometimes it's really, it's really sad. I just ran into an Uber driver who had a couple more years left to work, and he said, "Are they going to take my job before I finish? Because I just need a couple more years." And I said, "No, you're good. I wouldn't get in one of those self-driving cars if somebody paid me." And so, we went on about it. But I think my point that I try to make over and over again is that language is a living, breathing thing. What is okay to say today may not be okay to say tomorrow, vice versa. We have all these words that embarrassingly enough, I've had to Google on Urban Dictionary to figure out what they mean, because I'm getting older, and things like that. We can't, I don't think we can prepare, this magic AI for things like Riz and things like that. I just don't see it. And so, it's always changing, it's always evolving, and I don't think you can take the human out of that. There's no way for a machine to predict words that we don't even use until another generation comes along and adds some new ones to our vocabulary. So I don't see the human component coming out of this ever.
I would like to dig in a little bit more on Turkopticon, but it occurs to me that maybe we kind of skipped over what this data labeling work looks like in the first place. So I think, what was it, 2005
Sure.
that Amazon came out with the Mechanical Turk?
Amazon Mechanical Turk, yeah.
So can you give us an idea of, like, what is this job that we're even talking about?
So some people call it data work, some people call it gig work or click work, but basically what happens is people sign up to be a requester to offer work. And that could be a university doing a psychology study, it could be a company trying to get their branding right. I rated people's online dating photos at one point. I mean, there's all kinds of things out there, okay? So back in um, 2005 when this started, Amazon was the first big platform to do this. So they had Google, Microsoft, all the big tech companies as clients, and these people would list a variety of tasks, and you were qualified for some and not others, depending on tests that you took or milestones that you reached, or your approval rating for tasks you did correctly versus not. Um, and so you really kind of get into this groove and you find out what you like. Some people love to take surveys and participate in that stuff. Other folks like to do the data labeling and annotation. You're given a photo and it might say click on all the bikes in this photo, and it's a busy street photo. And little by little this has been training these systems, right, to recognize bikes, to all to recognize people. And then I can't help but think again about that Waymo car. Like, were we marking bikes and people so those cars didn't hit them? I don't know, but it makes you wonder. And then there are certain things, content moderation, flagging videos for inappropriate content. Amazon didn't get too much into that. It stayed pretty borderline. It didn't get into these horrific things I was speaking about earlier. But there were times where there were things that were disturbing and distressing to workers. But it was back then there was such a wide variety of tasks. As the great AI race, as they say, has progressed, it's been more companies pulling away from Amazon, setting up their own data work platforms, and now you find few surveys and many tasks dealing with annotation and labeling and things like that because we're so focused on AI right now.
So then Turkopticon is kind of the inverse concept, right? It's a worker led platform for reviewing the requesters, and you were a lead organizer there. How do you organize workers who are scattered all across the globe?
Oh, that is the million-dollar question. It is not easy, I can tell you that. Um, not everybody has the same infrastructure, and there are people you are just never going to run across. But we spent a lot of time going into every corner of the internet, every forum we could find, we followed every hashtag, we did all of the things, newsletters, set up social media accounts, all these things to try to reach out and find workers in the littlest of places. And it takes time. It takes time, and it takes time to build the trust also. If you find a group of workers who has been hidden away from other workers, the one thing common among data workers is they don't trust. folks that easy. So when you come in from the outside and say, "Hey, I want to help you," you really have to build that trust before somebody's going to say, "Okay, I believe you." And so it's a very time consuming process. You do a lot of mapping and surveys and try to figure out who's located where, what type of work they're doing, who is best suited to reach out and start building these relationships. And it's very rewarding. It's great when you find workers who had no idea other workers even existed. It can be frustrating on a lot of days, though, when you just seem like you're not making any progress at all. It's not a quick thing, and nobody has laid the blueprint to do it before. So as we looked out, say, oh, how did people do this before? There wasn't a whole lot to go on.
It's almost like you need to set up projects on these platforms that just tell people about your project, have them label messages to them.
That's actually a great idea.
So now you're at DAIR, which is the Distributed AI Research Institute.
Yes,
And the Data Workers Inquiry Project is a DAIR project, right?
yes.
Okay, so the Data Workers Inquiry Project puts the workers in charge of researching their own conditions.
Yes. So I have been with DARE for about 2.5 years. I've been on the Data Workers Inquiry Project for a year and a half. I don't know. It's gone so quickly. But what we do is we identify people who want to talk about their conditions, and then we assist them in conducting their own research and doing their own project, and they pick the output that they want people to see or hear to convey their message. And it's really, you get a look at conditions that you wouldn't normally get. Researchers, no matter how friendly you are, no matter how well you know somebody, aren't going to get as honest of answers as, somebody asking who's part of the community. And that's been something that's been shocking. It's been wonderful to get that knowledge, but it's also been shocking and heartbreaking at the same time. Um, and it's really it's so interesting to see what happens after these inquiries. Like, so many of these workers are empowered and they feel like they can do something and make a change, or they're already working to make change, and it just speeds it up. And so to see all of the things that people have gone through and all of the work conditions and everything to come out the other side and still stand up against these companies says so much. So this project for me has been, I've learned so much, but I've also met the most amazing people. And even the projects that have long been completed, we still check in with each other, see how we're doing. And we built these really interesting relationships that are so unique.
Lots of reasons for hope then.
Yes, absolutely. It's wonderful every time I see something or an article or whatever that, it's somebody that was part of the project earlier and they're doing this amazing thing, and we love to share that stuff in our group chat, so and so is in this article, and it's just really great to see.
Krystal, before we close out, I just want to ask you, right? Like, what's one idea or takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with after hearing this conversation?
Wow. Okay, I'll try and boil it down to one. I think knowing knowing that this type of labor exists, knowing these conditions are very challenging, to put it mildly, I think helping to elevate the voices of the workers is so important. And if I could ask people to do one thing, it would be to do that. And also put pressure on companies if you can, if you're in a position to be more transparent about their labor, and just keep in mind that the products that everybody's using, they're not magic. There are real people enduring very harsh conditions behind all of these projects. And just to not forget, just to keep talking about it.
Out of curiosity, where is sort of the best place for folks to learn and stay more connected to the type of work that you're doing?
So I, again, am going to point to the Data Workers Inquiry website. It's just dataworkersinquiry.com. It has all of the inquiries. Every time we add a new one, it gets added to the repository. Um, the, the widest selection of stories and experiences that I've seen have all landed there. Worker groups, that African Content Moderators Union, the Data Labelers Association, I believe it's Kenyan Gig Workers Union, just starting up organizations like Turkopticon, like DAIR, explore what's on these websites, reach out to people, ask questions. There's a lot of good articles that get shared via social media from all of these counts as well. So I would say those are all great places to start.
Thanks for joining us for Socially Conscious AI with our guest, Krystal Kauffman. If this discussion sparked new insights for you, please like and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. For Valencio Cardoso, I'm Roma Burkott. Until next time, stay curious, stay conscious.